All right, welcome to the 13th tmosso podcast. This is kind of a big one. For lucky number 13, I want to introduce our guest, Scott Devon, founder of Devon Works, car enthusiast, creator of watches, and entrepreneur. Scott, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for inviting me.
Okay, so here's the thing. To a lot of the watch collectors out there, you're not going to be quite as familiar to them as F.P. Journe and Terry Stern. So if you could just sort of give us an introduction, how did you come to love watches as a collector yourself?
I think it actually started with my grandfather. He was a collector of watches and timepieces and actually cuckoo clocks and all kinds of gizmo things. And I traveled with him a lot in my youth. He had an Airstream trailer and traveled across the country with he and my grandmother. And so I think it's just, and my dad liked watches as well. So it's kind of a family tradition to, when I graduated from college, my dad gave me his Rolex and he bought a new one. And so it's like the legacy, I believe, of watches that means a lot to me, the heritage of it.
So now, obviously, you started as a collector, but your intention wasn't always to create watches. Tell us, how did you jump from collecting watches to creating watches, and what took place?
Well, it came about when we did the Devon GTX supercar. And as you might be aware, when people do cars, they also look at accessories. And the designer that I was working with at the time, Jason Wilbur, had this concept for the Tread 1, and he was a Honda concept car designer. And I was doing my project in Newport Beach, California, and he was also working on a concept car at the same time at Aria. And the owner of the company introduced us together and said, "You might really want to see this guy's watch. I think it will fit your car." And so we also did motorcycles and some fashion brands and jeans, leather jackets, things like that, that all revolved around the GTX.
So from those early days, the formative concept for a watch, it's not easy to make a watch anywhere, let alone in the US. Was your first instinct to resort to Switzerland, try to find a supplier, or did you think Southern California straight away?
Well, our watch is really so unique that it doesn't really have any traditional Swiss parts or traditional watchmaking mechanisms. So we actually found out that we could maybe make it in Switzerland, but we could maybe make a handful of watches that would cost $300,000 each, and that was really not my intent. So I wanted to have it a little bit more. They're still expensive, ranging from $12,000 to $25,000, but at least they're somewhat in the range of affordability for certain collectors. And so we found a small boutique aerospace engineering company in outside of LA in Hesperia, California, and they took the project on. And so really it's derivative of autospace, or they work for NASA, they work for a lot of Boeing, and a lot of the parts are basically from that industry.
So it's kind of cool. You've got a local sort of ecosystem of suppliers. What does Devon Works itself look like? Because a lot of folks online don't really know. They can picture a Swiss watch factory, but at your factory, at your operation, do you have watchmakers? Do you have production facilities? What does it actually look like?
Yeah, it's a small shop. It's maybe 3,000 square feet. And again, they do aerospace technology in that building as well as our watches. And so we've been with them now 12 years, and they do a great job for us. And they're very, how do I say it, very boutique oriented and artists in their own right. And, but some of the things are traditional. We do little cubicles with, enclosed seals. So the watches are totally perfect and clean, and they have a CNC machine, things like that they do in house there too. But it's basically hand assembled. So it takes about 7 days to make one watch, which is, a long time, but that's what happens when you have 350 different parts that go in a watch.
Definitely. I recently had a Swiss CEO brag to me that his watches could be assembled in something like 20 hours. And it sounds like he might be taking shortcuts compared to your operation. I've also noticed that your turnarounds are incredible. Like when I've sent watches in for service at Devon, it's always been, 2 weeks, not months, not years. What do you see on the service side? Because that's something you seem to do well, and Switzerland seems to still be learning. So how does that
work? I appreciate that. Daryl Hardy works for us out in Hesperia, California, and he does a great job with customer service. And my wife, Terry, is the directing manager of the company, and they're pretty much on it. And I'm really proud of what they do and how they do customer service very well.
So now, when the time comes to create a new watch, obviously, in 2010, you made a huge splash with the Tread 1, first GPHG nomination for an American brand. 2 years later, Tread 2 chronograph. You've worked with guys like Marco Petrovic and Jason Wilbur. What does the creative process look like? It starts with you, but how do you hand that off to the creative team?
Marco and I work really well together. He's been with us for 10 years now, since the inception with Jason Wilbur. And Marco lives in Novi Sad, Serbia. And we used to meet once a year at the Swiss Watch Show in Basel. And but that's come to pass where we don't go anymore, as most people don't. And so we're just really virtual on emails, and we talk on the phone once in a while as well. But he's almost like a third son. I have two sons that are in my food company, but Marco is my other third son, and we get along splendidly. I'm half Serbian myself, so I think we have a mutual connection through our heritage. But he's very talented. He was one of the only Serbian youths that had a scholarship to go to art school in Italy, and he can actually. He's a fine artist, but he's also a great CPG or not computer person as well. But he can actually paint the Mona Lisa by hand. He's that talented as far as an artist. So he's great to work with. Wonderful young man.
I didn't realize there was that double Serbian link to the Devon Tread watches. I've been saying for years that I felt like Tesla and Tread watches someday had to come together. So, you've got that triumvirate of like Serbian heritage there with the Tesla name. Do you ever consider anything like that, branding with an auto company?
Yeah, I would love to work with Elon Musk, and in fact, there was a gentleman that collected our watches that worked for him, and I had a chance to go and tour SpaceX, and it just never happened. He left the company and went with another company, but he was an engineer for Elon, and so yeah, we're working on some things in the future that I think they would be interested in our vision of what we can do with watches and even smartwatches. So I'd love to work with them, or Google, or whoever it be, but we'll eventually get that area.
Okay, so we'll talk, because I want to ask you about what's coming up at Devon Works, because you guys have kept a low profile for a little bit on social media. There have been a couple of times, they weren't car tie-ups, but when I felt you guys punched way above your weight in terms of appearances in mainstream media. How did you get on Shark Tank and the Avengers movies?
It's interesting. The Shark Tank, my nephew actually knows Damon John, and he's a serial entrepreneur like I am, and he's done fabulously well. And he got us connected. So he goes, send him. He wants to wear your watch on the show, and I said, perfect. So it's just a connection of mutual friends. And then as far as the Avengers. Robert Downey Jr. was fabulous. We're in the last two Avengers movies, and I gave him some free watches for the first one. A lot of people would give him a lot of money for what we were exposed to. And just out of a good heart, he put it in the second movie without any charge. So he just loves the watches. So, and with him, we had a mutual friend again. So it was kind of fun that way. And I'm also working with Michael Irving right now. He's going to debut our next watch in NFL Network next year. He's a fabulous guy. Got to be friends with him too. So watches have really enabled me to connect with some celebrities. It's been fun to meet these people, and they really enjoy our innovations. And but he'll be wearing this one. This is a new one, prototype that we just made. It's quite fabulous, I think. And so it has the whole bracelet and things like that. And here's another prototype of what's coming next too. So, and then we're also working on a smartwatch too. So I can't reveal that now. I'm working on the patent process, but that's one I want to approach Tesla and Google with. I've got a friend at Google that's going to show it over there. So you never know, but that's way out of our league as far as financial ability to make it. It's a significant investment, and so we need a partner like a tech company for that. But it's unbelievably brilliant design. Marco did that one.
Very cool. So for those of you out in cyberspace who are just listening, rewind for a moment. The Iron Man movies, remember Iron Man 2? Remember how much money Jaeger-LeCoultre paid Robert Downey Jr. to wear those watches? Well, it took a watch and a little bit of goodwill to get him to wear a Devon. So just make that your reference point. Jaeger-LeCoultre was what came first. That's a tough act to follow.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm indebted to him, and it's just fun to be a fan too. You know, when you see your heroes on TV or movies and things like that do the right thing, you know, it just reinforces what good people they are. And I'm really proud of my company and just happy to be able to meet some of these people that I never would have in my other world of food manufacturing. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, and again, for those of you out in cyberspace, if you've ever had frozen bread before, especially with garlic, you might know Scott Devon from a different experience.
Yep, it's Cole's Quality Foods. It's been a 75-year-old company, and I'm third generation into it, and we're doing great. Now my two sons are joining the business right now, and I thought they would gravitate towards watches and more glamorous things, but they like the business side of the food business. So I think they know where that's where the money pays for the house. So they're pretty smart.
Yeah, you know, I've often said that you can make a small fortune in watches if you start with a large fortune.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah, it's a labor of love, I guess. You know.
so let me ask you a question then about the future, because you teased a little bit. And for those of you who are listening to this podcast, Scott is wearing a prototype watch right now. He is wearing a full bracelet prototype right now. You might recall that the exoskeleton bracelets from the mid-2010s kind of showed what this could look like. It looks like you're finally coming to market with it. Could you tell us a little bit about this? Maybe not the smartwatch, that's secret, but can you tell
Right.
about that one?
Yeah, it's a wonderful watch. I mean, I've been wearing the prototypes for maybe the last few months, and I get stopped everywhere and asked about it. It's a conversation piece, which are obviously our Tread 1 and Tread 2 are as well, but this one's a showstopper, and it is based on the exoskeleton that we previewed many years ago, but just didn't put into production. But you know, we took kind of a hiatus for the last few years, figuring out if we want to be an online seller or traditional retailers. And you know, the watch industry's changed so much in the last even 5 years that you know we really had to kind of like pause for a bit. But now we're reactivating and getting more involved. And our last big project was the Star Wars watch that we did with Lucasfilms. This one right here, and that was a fun project too. I actually got to tour Lucasfilms in San Francisco a couple times and saw where they created ET and all these fabulous animation projects there, and got to meet the people there, and that was a real fun project as well. We got a lot of exposure for the Star Wars when they first relaunched it, and got a little peek behind the curtain over there. It was fun.
And yeah, that's another question I wanted to ask you, because when I think of blockbuster movies, again, I think Richemont money, I think Swatch Group money, James Bond wearing a Omega Seamaster. It's usually not the kind of thing where a small brand sort of associates with a giant studio, especially since Star Wars is now Disney. So how did that come about? As small a brand as yours?
Yeah, they contacted me. They did their research, and they thought it would fit Star Wars with our innovation. And I actually got to tour the Disney campus too in Los Angeles, which was fabulous as well. And so yeah, they reached out to me. You know, we've had a number of people just reach out to us, but again, we're a very small company and but very innovative. So I think people appreciate that. And so we've had a lot of chances to really get involved in TV shows as well. We've been in a number of TV shows and movies as well. But yeah, we don't have the funds to outspend our big competitors in Switzerland, but you know, they just appreciate our innovation more than anything.
Well, that's pretty cool. I guess, you know, great minds think alike.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I've got to broach the topic of the Devon GTX. You kind of broached it early on. It's what came before the watches. A lot of our viewers and listeners are big auto enthusiasts. Tell me the story about that and whether we might ever see it revisited.
Well, I still have the record-setting red GTX, Devon GTX, in Michigan here. I haven't driven it in a while, but it set the lap record at Laguna Seca for production cars and also Willow Springs, California. And I recently watched that movie Ford versus Ferrari again, and we did all our testing at Willow Springs, and it just brought back so many good memories. Justin Bell was our driver, famous race driver, really close friends. And we had a VP at Ford. We had a small team, you know, like we did with the watches. It was maybe eight people, and it was just a great experience. It was about a 3-year project. Clive Hawkins, that owns Aria Group, was very involved, and just a wonderful experience. And the Ford versus Ferrari. You know, I felt a little bit like I had a couple of years of Carroll Shelby in me there, and who I got to meet too. And it was really fun. I really enjoyed it, and it really started everything. I went out there with a dream, and I actually got to go to visit Ferrari and Pininfarina in Italy, and met a lot of cool people in the car industry. And we debuted at Pebble Beach, the Concours d'Elegance out there, and had a car on the putting green, next to even the guy that I'm sorry, I forget his name, but Barris, I think he did the Batman car, and he's passed since then. But I got to meet him and Fisker, a lot of these guys, and we're out there, and even Tesla did one of their cars at the shop that we were at, and but everything was private. Everybody had their kind of like privacy because it was concept cars, right? But the owner and I became really close friends, and he introduced me to these people, and so that was just a great experience. We were going to make about 10 a year, and we based it off the Viper, the chassis, but we basically stripped it down to the chassis and carbon fibered the whole car up, and had a really cool experience with a professor at San Diego State out there that did the wind tunnel for us. And so we did a lot of aerodynamics and great design. Daniel Poland from Sweden did the design of the car. And but we hit 2008, and the whole financial world collapsed, and so that project kind of went away. And but we did continue with the watches and some of the other projects. And the motorcycles, we continued with those too a little bit. But the watches had this the staying power over the long term since that project started.
Yeah, I know you mentioned earlier that you are a serial entrepreneur. You've had fashion, you've had motorcycle interests, automotive, obviously food. What was it about the watch that just took off? Because you launched that in a pretty tough time right after the financial crisis, and that seemed to immediately catch fire.
Yeah, it was interesting. We had some friends in Singapore that are really big collectors in the independent market, as you're aware of, and they really liked my watches. I mean, I was over there, and this is like a pinch me moment, but I was over there signing autographs, in magazines and stuff like that, and I never thought that would ever happen. And so they did a launch party for us there, and one of the gentlemen was on the board of the Grand Prix d'Orléans, and he nominated us, and that really put us on a big stage there. We went to the award show, and it was like the Oscars for watches, and black tie and all this kind of stuff. But it was all in French, and I speak 2 years of high school French, which is worse than having 2 years of high school French. And so I didn't understand anything, but it was still an honor to be there.
Now, looking forward, obviously you have interests in smartwatches, potentially interests in working with maybe a larger technology partner. You're going to continue with the treads, I presume. There was mention back in about 2014 of a workup with RGM and maybe combining on a mechanical watch. Have you ever thought again since then of checking out the mechanical space?
Yeah, we did, and that would be made in Switzerland. RGM did the initial research for us, and then we identified a couple partners in Switzerland that could make the mechanical watch. The only thing, again, was the market at the time that we didn't pursue it. And it would be probably a $300,000 watch mechanically. It was really cool. It was similar to Max Bousset's watch, with the more of a bubble, like the Legacy.
Oh yeah.
And it was really cool. I still have it in the back of my mind to relaunch that at one point, because we spent a lot of money getting it to where it's prototype stage. So, but again, I was waiting for the market to kind of rebound to kickstart the company back up, and it's still in my back of my brain that I want to do. That's going to be my legacy piece once I do that one.
Oh, very cool.
That's my dog.
we love dogs here on the podcast. So that's all good. So, okay, interesting, because you have laid low for the last couple of years. Not a huge presence on social media, not a huge presence online. You've done a lot of, kind of online sales. And you mentioned the decline of Baselworld, and I felt the same way. I was there in 2016, and it felt like the dinosaurs just before the comet hit. Yeah. So looking forward, how are you going to roll out to customers with the combination of the trade shows being basically dead and COVID still standing out in our way?
Yeah, it is difficult times. It's a great question. And it's evolving as we speak. But I do think, I still have a lot of friends in the media in the world that Errol Adams, familiar with. He's willing to launch our next watch, and obviously this podcast that you have is great. And so yeah, I think it's going to be more of an online marketing type thing, and hopefully we'll do more again with some of our celebrities, ambassadors, things like that to get it going. But right now, we're pretty lean, and we're really down to make, we have some great retailers too still that support the brand, and have a standing base of maybe 25 collectors that will buy anything I make, which is wonderful. And I become friends with a lot of those people. And so we've got a nice core group, and I'm not looking for the company to be that big. We found our niche, and we like our niche where we're at. And at one point I tried to make it bigger, but the watch doesn't want to be scaled up. It wants to be very small based and niche oriented, and very artful. And I think our collectors appreciate that as well, because I think long term, I'm sitting in front of, these are all 01s, by the way, and that it's going to be a good investment long term. Might take a while, but I think they're holding their value in the marketplace.
And just in terms of scale, I mean, we often talk about brands like a Longo & Zona making 5,000 watches a year being low volume. What does volume look like at Devon? Like, how many watches, Tread 1s and 2s, do you make each year?
Yeah, we're hovering around 100 to 150 right now. Our biggest seller has been the Steampunk. We made the Steampunk watch, and we sold out of 150 of these. And we're going to do a variation of this too. I also have a luggage line, again, scaling out the accessory market. I've got a tremendous design. Actually, Marco did the design on the luggage line that matches the Steampunk, and that's another niche that that people are fanatical about. They collect Steampunk like you wouldn't believe it, and so I'm hoping to launch that. I've got a local fella here that I live in main time in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where there's a lot of furniture companies based here, and so I have access to a lot of great artisans that are in the area, and I can make these in small volumes here, and I'm pretty excited about that one though too. It's one of those ones. I had it on Pinterest for a long time, and it never goes away. It just keeps hitting, people liking. I'm like, I got to make this thing, So again, I'm excited again because my food company's skyrocketing because of COVID, which, I want COVID to go away. Don't get me wrong, but that enables me to do more fun stuff in the future with the Devon brand.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because your volume is low, and I know from your Pinterest, I've seen your Pinterest page, you also have an interest in fine art and sculpture. Have you ever thought of, maybe working with someone like Max Busser of MB&F with his MAD galleries, or with art galleries proper, to maybe distribute through a different channel than traditional watch retail, like a gallery situation?
Yeah, Max has probably been one of the best friends I've met through the watch industry, and I respect him 100%. And we've shared some things over the years that helped each other's company, I think, and mostly me. And we thought about collaborating, but he's so busy, with future stuff. He's 10 years out, and I appreciate that. But he's always, I can email him or call him, and he's always available to discuss things. But yeah, I also was thinking about doing a similar thing in the U.S. that he has too, but retail is really tough right now, and so I think again online and virtual and things like that are the future for our company as well. But tons of respect for Max and what he's done over there. It's just fabulous. I collect some of his pieces myself, and I've got I love his sculpture pieces. They're just what I would want to do too. So we're pretty tightly aligned.
You guys, you keep a low profile on Instagram, but I did notice right at the end of 2020, you posted I'm going to call it a horologically themed sculpture that looked an awful lot like the T-Rex from MB&F. Do you have plans to make that little guy? Is that something that's
Yeah. We did, again, a lot of research on that, and we put it on pause, and it was cool. It would be a watch that hovered, over a magnetic sphere. It was a sphere. And, again, we've got so many ideas, but we're a little bit lacking of funds until recently. So some of these things might be resurrected in the future, but it's, and I'm getting the age where my boys are going to take over the company, and so I can do more fun stuff with Devon too in the future.
Okay, so now having been in the industry now for over a decade, you got a little bit of perspective. You've met people, you've seen the scene, and you have a general idea of the lay of the land. So as a collector and a manufacturer, uh, what's caught your attention the last couple of years? Up and comers, new trends, model debuts. What's piqued your interest from that perspective?
Well, I do think, for me at least, the future where my mindset is, as far as vision, is to team up with technology. And, I wish I could share more about what we're doing, but we're in the process of patenting and, trying to protect my intellectual creations that Marco and I are working on. And, but, I would love to get in that sector. And even at the beginning, I thought, we were not obviously a traditional watchmaker in Switzerland, and really more aligned with technology as far as our mechanisms, and even electric. It was kind of frowned upon at the beginning, electric watch, like that, rather than mechanical. And so the Swiss are very good at marketing and controlling that narrative for, the collectors and things like that. But, like I said, I think we're more aligned with Tesla and Apple and Google in the future. And that's really where I really want to play in that space, rather than, again, I catch myself because I still would want to do a mechanical watch in Switzerland. So I'm not opposed to that, but I think the future is more towards technology.
Okay, it's very cool stuff. Now, of course, you're still collecting, and for those of you who are out in cyberspace listening to this as opposed to watching the video, Scott has a huge array of serial number 1 Devon watches in front of him right now. So I can see part of his watch collection right here. But let me ask, going back to your family connections to watches and your time as a collector, and I'm sure you still buy a watch from time to time, what does your collection look like? What are some watches that mean a lot to you?
It's funny because my wife asked me that question a lot too, and I'm like going, well, do I buy a Patek or do I buy an AP or do I? I mean, I've got some. I love some of the watches out there right now, and very much the traditional ones as well, as even though we're kind of way out there as far as space age. But I would think, my next watch should probably be from Max. I've got my eye on a couple there, and I'm really close to the Provident guys down in Florida, and I buy through them, when I do my personal collections. But I do love sculpture, and I'm a sculpture artist myself, and so I kind of gravitate towards that world too, and dimensional art and things like that. So. I just completed my second sculpture. I'm doing one in glass right now in New York. And so I'm kind of gravitating more towards that area to my personal designs and also my watch designs. And, I really want to go to the next level though now. I'm going to be 60 in June, and I'm like going, okay, we're in the last stretch here, and, where I'm going to leave my mark on. And I just want to do some really out there stuff that cements our legacy as a brand.
Well, never say never. Colonel Sanders got his start in franchising in the 60s. That worked out just fine. So given the times we live in right now, you mentioned food's doing really well, but what I've noticed is that not only are people cooking in, but we're seeing just skyrocketing values of luxuries. It's not general inflation. It's not food and fuel and clothing, but it's non-fungible token ownership of digital art, fine art, cars, watches. I can't figure out what's going on that there seems to be a sudden insatiable demand for investment grade luxuries. Are you seeing that on your side, and what's driving this?
I think COVID is a long lasting shift in consumer buying patterns, and I think people living in home a lot. Obviously real estate's gone up quite a bit, especially in resort areas in Florida and even northern Michigan, where we're building a house up there now on Lake Michigan. And I just think people kind of reset and take a look at their lives maybe a little bit more holistically, and thinking what's really important. And the ability to work remote is also very freeing, and I mean, my office, we've been remote for the last year, and have kept up with everything. Certain people work great that way, some don't, and as managers, it's sometimes hard because you don't have face-to-face. But again, with technology, I call on the biggest retailers in the world: Walmart, Kroger, Meijer, Spartan, things like that. And we do Zoom calls, so there's no travel that we have to get on a plane and go to Bentonville, Arkansas, and call on our buyers face-to-face. So technology, again, if there's a theme, I guess, where I'm going with all this, I think technology is changing the world in a maybe more freeing way, even though, we're attached to our phones, constantly, but it also enables us to maybe not work 9 to 5. We can work at our leisure a little bit more and maybe work maybe a little later, a little earlier, depending on your lifestyle. So and I think these changes are permanent.
And definitely, I can see what you mean. Not just the way we work being a little bit different, but it's infinitely easier from the comfort of your own net connection to find collector cars and watches and houses and art
Yeah,
than it is when you're working in your physical office surrounded by colleagues.
right.
Okay. So I'll ask just one final question, but what can people look forward to from Devon in 2021 going forward? Because I do want to end this on a forward-looking note.
Yeah, for sure. I think as far as current projects that are really close to happening would be the Steampunk luggage line, and I can share some of those designs with you later. And also the exoskeleton is close to. I think we're 30 days out from this one, and so those are really about to be born, and in the future from there, our next step would be the smartwatch and technology and what that can do, and even raise it to a whole dimension over what Apple has right now. And there's just some amazing things going on right now in that sphere right now in that sector. So I'm pretty excited about talking with Marco, and I were brainstorming what can this watch do, what do you think it can do, and and it really is back to Star Trek days, when you had these, or Dick Tracy, and some of these things we're working on are pretty revolutionary.
Outstanding. Well, Scott Devon, creator of cars, watches, and art, entrepreneur, and now podcaster. Scott, thanks so much for your time.
It was very interesting, and thank you for the great questions. I enjoyed it thoroughly. Thank you.